एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम्। हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति। हृदि विषमनसा स्वम् चिन्वता मज्जता अनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तत भावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भाव कोऽहं भावयुत कुतो वरधिय दृष्टात्मनिष्ठात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। Namo Ramana. We have been meditating on the verses of Anma bodham, the Tamil translation by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi of the work Atma bodha by Adi Shankara. We have come up to verse number 28. Today we have to meditate on 29 and 30. Before we start with the 29th verse, one of the practices that has helped me with Ullad Narpad, the work, the Upanishad of Bhagavan, had been to remember some verses like verse number 4, which says, Urvam Tanayin, Ulag Paramatram, Urvam Tanandre, Uvatrin, Uruvate Kanurudal Yavan, Evan, கண்ணலார் காட்சி உண்டோ கண்ணது தான் அந்தமிலா கண்ணமே. The fourth verse, it makes sadhana direct and simple by saying that only so far as you have a name and form can the problem or the ultimate resolver of problems, the Ishvara, can have name and form. Only if you desire to retain your own name and form as your realities, then the problem you started out with, which you wanted to resolve, which is appearing, looming like the whole universe before you, and the Ishvara, the ultimate resolver of all problems, they also have name and form. But uruvam thanandre, if you reduce yourself to self-attention, there it could be reduce yourself or expand yourself. The words like reduction and expansion lose their meaning in self-attention. If you reduce yourself to holding the I in self-enquiry, both the problem and the ultimate solution are also nameless and formless. Now that would help me a lot in practicing Atma Vicharam with the help of remembering verses from Ulladu Narpadu. There are a few other verses like that. There is another help from Ulladu Narpadu, like there would be themes in some selection of verses. Some themes which would help me look at the whole situation and come to self-enquiry. See, the ultimate thing is these supports are to remember the Atma bodham, to remember who you are or be as you really are. The first support is remembering any one of those verses. Like discussing Ulladu Narpadu with many devotees, many of them would say each verse is as powerful, as potent as the next or the earlier. Each verse is capable of taking us to the source. But then I would find some of the verses more easily understandable and applicable to my practice. And the second support I used to get was some themes that run. For example, the verses on the body and the world. The one verse in the is on body, that is 17 and 18. உடல் நானே தன்னை உணரார்க்கும் உணர்ந்தார்க்கும் உடல் அளவே நான் தன் உணரார்க்கு உடல் உள்ளே தன் உணர்ந்தார்க்கு எல்லையற தான் ஒளிரும் நான் and உலகுண்மையாகும் உணர்வில்லார்க்கும் உள்ளார்க்கும் உலகளவாம் உண்மை உணரார்க்கு உலகினுக்கு ஆதாரமாய் உருவற்று ஆறும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை. These two verses used to form a theme for me, in the sense that the body is also addressed, the entire world is also addressed, and the state of the jnani and the ajnani are addressed. So the body and the world complete an inquiry that the whole situation is taken account of. It could be applicable to the subtle body and the subtle world also. What I would do is remember them together, the common theme being for the self-attentive jnani, udal ulle tan unarndarku ellayara தான் ஒளிரும் நான் உலகினுக்கு ஆதாரமாய் உருவற்று ஆறும் உணர்ந்தார் உண்மை. Both come to the nameless and formless self, both the verses, the nameless and formless self-attention is the truth of the body, is the truth of the world. So when we are self-attentive, both the body is also that self-attentive self, the world is also the self-attentive self. Why all this introduction? There are a few other themes, like all the verses on the ego, all the 4 verses on ego, they form one theme. But then what am I driving at is that if we go 2 verses back to the last week and connect it with the 2 verses we are looking today, we get a theme. So let me present the theme to you first and then go into the verses. The theme is very simple. It is going to take us to the Atma. How the theme is built in these 4 verses is that in the 27th verse, so I have gone back 28 and 27. So I am going to just take up 27, 28, 29 and 30, which we are to see today, just for the theme behind the 4 verses. For what purpose? So that if you remember the theme, then the sadhana of self-enquiry becomes very clear and brought to the forefront. In 27th verse, the Acharya says, Tannaitan jeevanena tambile pambu pol unniye acham uruhindran. Tannaitan jeevanalan yan paramanma endru தேர்ந்ததனாலாவன் அஞ்சானாய் அவன். The meaning is, by taking ourselves to be a consciousness particularized and trapped inside a body, gross or subtle, we put ourselves to tremendous fear. And the path to overcome that fear is to identify with the Paramatma. Tannaitan jeevanalan. I am not that consciousness which is particularized and trapped inside this body, but I am that which Bhagavan says, Hariyaditara jeevara ahavarisa guhayil arivai ramikkum paramatman. That is what you are. The verse simply says, gives the ultimate solution. Then in the next 3 verses, next 4 verses, we will take the 4th as the culmination of this area. But then we will complete the enquiry for these 4 verses. You have to identify with the Paramatma to be rid of all kinds of fears. So that is the import of the 27th verse. The story is built up that where is the problem? The problem is that by our actions, by our thoughts, by the very way we interact, we are always reinforcing the belief that we are this consciousness trapped inside a body. The way to get rid of that fear is to identify with the Paramatma present in all jivas is our explanation. Then the next 3 verses, including the 28th and 29th and 30th, we are going to see, they are going to delineate about how to identify with the Paramatma. That's all. See, the author, the poet or the Acharya doesn't need to tell us how we feel trapped, because it is common experience. So the first part, that we get afraid of so many things. So many things cause us fear. Having something, not having something, the possibility of losing something that we have, all these cause fear. But then the simple solution is identify with the Paramatma. Now what is the way to do that? That is delineated. For 28th verse, Acharya begins, Oru porulam anma, Oru porulam anma, ஒளிர்க்கும் மதிமுன் கருவிகளை தீபம் கடாதி பொருவ ஒளியில் அவற்றால் ஒருபோதும் ஆன்மா ஒளிர்க்கப்படாதென்றுண. He gives us how the Atma is ஒரு பொருள், is self-luminous, and that self-luminous Atma is the one source from which the buddhi, indriyas and the body itself get life or get consciousness. We call it life when consciousness is joined with breath. We call it consciousness when we take life back to its subtle form of mind and its source. So these are terminologies which we can clear up for ourselves, that all these, the intellect, the mind, the breath, the indriyas and the body are given life or are given consciousness by the Swayam Prakasha Atma. ஒரு பொருளாம் ஆன்மா ஒளிர்க்கும் மதிமுன் கருவிகளை தீபம் கடாதி. Just how the tube light is revealing or showing the existence of this furniture in this room, like that the upadhis, the instruments of perception, are lit up by the Atma. The reverse is not possible. The furnitures cannot reveal the light. The furnitures are themselves dependent on the light for being revealed. The reverse is not possible. That is, ஒளியில் அவற்றால், the intellect, the mind, the breath and the body, they don't have consciousness of their own. Where have we seen this? We have seen a parallel in Upadesha Saram, where in verse 21 Bhagavan says, Vigrahendriya pranadhitamaha nahamekasat tajjadam yasat. உடல் பொறி உள்ளம் உயிர் உணர்வெல்லாம் ஜடமசத்தானதால் உயிர் இருள் எல்லாம் ஜடமசத்தானதால் உந்தி பெற சத்தான நானல்ல உந்தி பெற. So you cannot see the Paramatman with any of these instruments. That is what that verse number 28 was making clear to us. So 27 was asking us, don't get trapped into the body as a jiva. Identify with the Purna Vastu, the Atma. What is the nature of the Atma? The nature of Atma is self-luminous. It is the one giving light to the intellect, the mind, the indriyas and the body. Therefore, the body which was useful in seeing the world, the indriyas which were useful in bringing emotions to the world, the mind which was useful in bringing thoughts to the world, the intellect which was useful to superimposing the good and the bad, the cause and the effect and other dualities on the world, they are all not capable of revealing the Atma Swarupa, because they all vanish in deep sleep, where Atma Swarupa continues to exist. So the key point brought out in verse 28 is Atma Swarupa is self-luminous. None of these instruments which you were using to interact with the world, to interact with energy, to interact with thoughts, to interact with discriminating intellect, intellectual world, none of them tajjadam hyasat. They are all inert. In fact, verse 21 says, verse 22 it is, verse 22 says that they do not have existence of their own. They are all asat. How can you see that which is with the instrument that which is not? So the point brought out in the theme in the 28th verse is that these instruments are lit up by the self. The self can never be seen with any of these instruments. Now, to the theme of the 29th and theme of the 30th, then we get back to explaining the two verses. The theme of the 29th, let us see. விளக்கின் உருவை விளக்கிட வேறு விளக்கை விரும்பாவிதம் போர் விளங்கும் அறிவுருவாம் ஆன்மா அறிந்திடத் தன்னை பிரிதறிவு வேண்டப் பெறாது. விளக்கின் உருவை விளக்கிட வேறு விளக்கை விரும்பாவிதம் போல் விளங்கும் அறிவுருவாம் ஆன்மா அறிந்திடத் தன்னை பிரிதறிவு வேண்டப் பெறாது. What is the theme which connects with the previous two? 27th said, get rid of the bhavana that you are a limited consciousness trapped. Identify with the Supreme. The Supreme shines self-luminously, says the 28th verse. It reveals the instruments of perception. So, Vigrahendriya Pranadhitamaha, with those instruments, you cannot perceive the self-luminous self. That was 28. 29th clarifies that to see the self, you need not have any other light. விளக்கின் உருவை விளக்கிட வேறு விளக்கை விரும்பா விதம் போல். To see the light given by the tube light, you don't need another torch light. To see, forget about that the consciousness is needed at the room. Just keep to the level of worldly seeing. In the example, these are the limitations of the example, because to see that the real light of consciousness is required, but the example can only stay at that level between the tube light and the furniture. To see the furniture, you need the tube light, but to see the light of the tube light, I don't need another light. I don't need a torch light to be put on and reveal that. That is the example. So just like that, to see the Atma, you don't need any other light. You have to be the Atma. As Bhagavan says in Self-Enquiry, how to adore the Supreme, which is all except by abiding firmly as that. But let's go into that later. To continue the theme, 27 says, be the Paramatma, get rid of the bhavana that you are the Jiva. Bandha muktiyati tam param sukam vindati iha jivastu daivikaha. Then 28th verse reveals that Atma Swarupa shines of its own. It is the one which lights up the upadhis, Vigrahendriya Pranaditama. Therefore, Vigrahendriya Pranaditama, the body, the indriyas, the breath, the mind and the intellect, they cannot reveal the Atma Swarupa. That was 28. 29, the verse of today is to see the Atma Swarupa, you don't need any other light. The Atma Swarupa, you have to be the Atma Swarupa to see the Atma Swarupa. And then how to get there from the Jiva Bhava to the Atma Swarupa, that is the ending of the theme, the verse 30th, with which we will probably finish today. Neti neti vakinal niki upadhiyalam midiyam jivanma midila adiyam அப்பரமான்மாக்களின் ஐக்கியமா வாக்கியங்கள் செப்புவதோர்ந்து தெளி. Neti neti, the theme is brought. What is the sadhana? Neti neti vakina niki upadhiyalam. The first question answered by Bhagavan in Who Am I? Namya, where all the upadhis are removed, one after another. You can go through that. So the primary sadhana to get to the Atma Swarupa, Hariyaditara Jivara Ahavarisa Guhai Arivai Ramikkum Paramatman. How to identify with that? That is the only way to get rid of fear, says the Acharya. What is the sadhana? What is the ending of the theme? The next one is going to be how to apply this continuously. So I'm not going into 31. The story of today ends by Neti Neti Vakina. What were the upadhis? The upadhis, Vigra, Endriya, Prana, Dhi, Tamaha. All those are upadhis. So, by Neti Neti, when you see an upadhi, when you see an instrument of perception, should not use it and go to the world of that perception. What happens when you take the instrument of perception to be giving you something is that you get trapped in the world. When you take the body to be real, you get trapped in the sensory world. When you take the mind to be real, then you get trapped in the world of, let's go to the root, identities. I am so and so, I am so and so, I am so and so. This is the knowledge I have. These are the good people who are my friends. These are the others. Like that, we get trapped in those worlds. The upadhi, we see the same reality. Through the upadhis, we see them as a world. The reality is one and the same. If we don't reject the upadhis with neti neti, but take them to be real supports, real alambana, then we get trapped in the worlds revealed by those upadhis. So the theme of the 4 verses is like this. You can remember it so that the sadhana is reinforced. What is the theme? 27 says that the root of the problem, which has been delineated in 2-3 verses earlier, is the rising of the jiva bhava, and that is the root of all fears. What is the way to get rid of it? Find out that you are the Paramatma. The next verse, the Paramatma shines self-luminously, lights up all the upadhis, is never lit by the upadhis. The next verse of today's 29, to see the Paramatma, there cannot be a second light. You have to be the Paramatma. And the last one, how to be the Paramatma? Get rid of the upadhis, free the consciousness of upadhis. That is the theme. So let's go into the verses for today. Verses for today. Vilakkin uruvai vilakkidaveru vilakkai virumbavidam pol vilangum அறிவுருவாம் ஆன்மா அறிந்திடத் தன்னை பிரிதறிவு வேண்டப் பெறாது. Where we have seen this verse in Upadeshasaram, we see 23rd verse. We see Satvabhasika Chitvavetara Satyahi Chittayahi Ham. That is the verse which is parallel to Vilakkin Uruvai Vilakkidaveru Vilakkai Virumbavidam Pol Vilangum Arivuruvam Anma Arindidat Tannai பிரிதறிவு வேண்டப் பெறாது. சத்வபாசிகா சித்குவே தரா சத்தயாஹி சித்தயாஹி அகம். உள்ளதுணர உணர்வு வேறின்மையில் உள்ளதுணர்வாகும் உந்தி பெற உணர்வே நாமாயுளம் உந்தி பெற. Just as the light of the tube light doesn't need another torch light for it to be seen, the Atma Swarupa does not need another light for it to be seen, cannot be seen by another light. That is the question put in Upadeshasaram. Satvabhasika Chitpa Vetara. Unarvu where inmayin. Here, here there is a suggestion, there is an affirmation that it cannot be seen by any other light. That, as Bhagavan, I said, in self-enquiry, he begins with the invocation. How can we adore the Supreme, which is all, except by abiding firmly as that? The Purna Vastu, as the very name indicates, is that it is everything. There is nothing outside the Purna Vastu. When the Supreme is everything, how can you adore that by standing outside of it and saying, oh, how great you are, what an expanse? You feel you are outside of it and you have limited it. And then not only that you are able to praise it. You know its limits and you are able to measure and praise it. That's why in talks, Bhagavan says that Parvati Devi, when she came to Tiruvannamalai, she asks sage Gautama as to how to stop this tapasya and running around and all these sadhanas that I have been doing to get back to Ishvara. I was with him and I was asked to move on, go to Kashi, go to Kanchipuram, and now I find myself here in your ashram in Tiruvannamalai. What is the way so that I don't keep running around in circles like this? Then for our sake, Parvati Amma asks for our sake only, and Gautama Rishi answers, be one with Shiva. Don't ask for anything outside of Shiva. Be one with Shiva, so that there will be no outside and inside, and there will be no more going out and coming back. And that is the tapasya she undertakes. And it is said she is given half of Shiva's Swarupa. That's why Arunachala is also called as Ardhanarishwara. But then in talks, Bhagavan says, in that tapasya in Tiruvannamalai, she sees a light. In her tapasya, she is able to see an effulgence in front of her, which almost covers everything. But then she is seeing it. So she reasons out that if I can see that light, then that light is within the scope of my seeing. Therefore, it must be limited. Therefore, it is not the Atmaswarupa. And she lets it go. She does neti neti. This cannot be the true light. For whom is this seeing of effulgence? And the abidance in the self is the real light. So when we see the effulgence, then that effulgence is a matter of limitation. It is limited. Sattva bhasika chitkva vetara. That is, can you see it by another light? What that means? It means that both the seeing light and seen light are limited. Where now you have come to that point. Let us say that the sadhaka sees, first, many of the sadhakas in Atma Vichara tell Bhagavan, they have come to the point of darkness, blank. Now what to do? They have come up to deep sleep. Deep sleep they can see. Now what to do? Bhagavan says, where are you not there? So hold yourself. You are the light of the self. You can have to see it by yourself. Vilakkin urvai vilakkida வேறு விளக்கை என விரும்பா விதம் போல். To see yourself, you cannot ask for some other light. Now, what really happens? Bhagavan says in Upadesha Saram that Sataya hi chit, Chittaya hi aham. The thought which was going outside is now turned back on itself. And that self-luminous light, it consumes the outgoing light. The individuality is consumed in the outgoing light. And that abiding as that Atma Swarupa is only seeing the Atma Swarupa. We will see the next verse. So the clarity here is that Sattva Bhasika Chitkva Vetara Sattva Chit Chittayahyakam. There is this logical argument presented by Lakshman Sharmaji, which we can briefly go into, that if the Sadvastu is revealed by another light, that means what is the light by which that is revealed? It will be another light, therefore it will go ad infinitum, regression non ad infinitum or something like that. Therefore, you will never find the truth that way if the Sat Vastu is revealed by another light. Another argument he presents, to quickly go into that, is that if the Sat Vastu, which is the what is lit by a light apart from it, then that light doesn't have real existence. And the Sat Vastu doesn't have the light, and therefore this is Jada. So both are contrary to truth, that the self is self-luminous. That if you have a light apart from the self, then the self becomes chitless, or it becomes Jada, and that light becomes existenceless. Therefore, it becomes non-existent. How can a non-existent thing reveal an existent thing? How can an inert thing be the final truth? So the Sat and the Chit cannot be apart. They have to be Sattaya hi Chit, Chittaya hi Ham. The Sat itself is Chit. Sat Swarupa itself is the Chit Swarupa. That's why it's called as Sat Chit. Going to the 30th verse, how to come to the Sat Chit is Neti Neti Vakinal Niki Upadiyalam. So coming back to Upadesha Saram, what are the verses we have? We have the 3 verses there. The 3 verses are Isha Jivayor Veshadhibida Satswabhavato Vastu Kevalam Veshahanataha Swatmadarshanam Isha Darshanam Swatmarupataha Atma Samstitihi Swatmadarshanam Atmanirvaya Atmadishtaha. So we have once again taken 3 verses from Upadesha Saram to cover this story here, the theme of these 4 verses. Neti Neti Vakinal Niki Upadiyalam. What are the Upadis which are covering? Vigra, Indriya, Prana, Dhi, Tamaha. Vigra, it reveals the atomic or physical world. Indriya, it reveals the sensory world. It adds sensations to the atoms. Actually, the sensation is not there in the atoms, is what scientists are finding out. The senses are far superior to the physiological world. And the prana is subtler than the senses, because the senses get, at least the karmendriyas get activated by the prana. And the prana itself is come under niyantrana by the mind. And the mind gets its division as good and bad from the intellect. And the intellect, of course, rises from the tama of deep sleep. All these are the upadis which we have to do neti neti. For whom is this? For whom is this? When we do, it is not that they are merely instruments of perception, but they give us the jiva bhava. The jiva bhava makes us trapped in those worlds. Neti neti vakinal niki upadiyalam. Nidiyam jivanma midila. Adiyam paramanmakkalin aikiyamam. What happens when you get rid of all these upadis? We have the verse from Upadesha Saram, which says, Bandha muktiyati tamparam sukam vindati iha jivastu daivikaha. What was considered as jiva, I consider myself as jiva when I am associated with these upadis. When I take this uru, the moment I do neti neti and inquire who am I and hold the I, the very same thing which was called jiva, it becomes parama. Jivastu daivikaha. The The moment before, you were calling yourself as Jiva. But the momentless holding of the I won't say in the moment of holding. The holding of the I is free of time. The upadhi of time itself is crossed in self-attention. In that moment, and how direct and simple is Bhagavan's teachings. Urvam tanayin ulaga paramatram. The moment you come to Jiva Bhava, then surely there is the world and there is the God apart. Urvam tanandre. The moment you hold the I and get rid of your name and form, the world and God also, they give up their form and stand there one with you as the Paramatma. How simple. What you have to do, you have to just do neti of the upadhis, vigrahendriya pranadhitama. Then midila jiva. Midila jiva means there is nothing more to reject. That jiva itself is Paramatma, and that aikyam is what is taught in the Mahavakyas. The Mahavakyas, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, all these, the four Mahavakyas, they are indicating the, according to the Advaita branch of interpretation, they indicate the aikyam of the Jiva and Parama, but the Jiva is clarified as Jiva free of Upadhis. The Jiva rid of Upadhis is itself Paramatma. Not that Paramatma comes from somewhere else. That's what Jivastu Daivika. And how is this done? Isha Jivayor Vesha Dhibida. The only difference between Jivatma and Ishvara, not yet Paramatma, Jivatma and Ishvara, the difference is that the Upadhis are a little body and a little amount of mind, whereas Ishvara has the whole known cosmos as his body, and all knowledge, all buddhi is his mind. Let us say, for our understanding, let us take it like that. That is the Ishvara. So where is the difference? The difference is only in the body size and the subtle body size. Isha Jivayor Vesha Dhibida Satsvabhavato. The moment you come to the Satchitananda, both the Ishvara and Jiva are one and the same, says that verse. That is, Isha Jivayor Vesha Dhibida. Small body, small mind. Entire cosmos is body, entire knowledge as mind, but still it is Upadhi. For Ishvara, that is Upadhi, called as Maya Upadhi. For Jiva, this is Upadhi, called as ignorance Upadhi or Ajnana Upadhi. Let us say Ajnana and Maya. Maya is the Upadhi taken on by Ishvara to appear as this world, and Jiva, of course, has ignorance. But what the Jiva has to do? Tannai Upadhi vittorvadu than Isan Tannai Unarvada Undi Para Tanai Olirvada Undi. All the Jiva has to do is detach itself from its Upadhis. There is a traditional teacher in mysticism who says, you drop your shells, Ishvara will drop his shells for you. The whole spiritual teachings is that you drop the shells you are so attached to, Ishvara will drop his shells and reveal his truth. What is the truth? Isha Jivayor Veshadhibida Satsvabhavato Vastu Kevalam Veshahanataha Swatma Darshanam Isha Darshanam Swatma Rupada. The Ishvara himself. Now you are not interested in becoming a better Jiva. You are not interested in becoming a divine entity. You are not interested in becoming even the Ishvara who has the Sakala has his Upadhi. No, that is a limitation on consciousness. Then what is the reality presented to us? Reality presented to us is that you are the self-luminous self, not something that is holding on to or occupying an entity and then feeling great or small. It is self-luminous self, beyond the great and small. There is no great, there is no small. There is no inside, there is no outside. Such is the nature of the self, and that is what you are. what you have to do? Neti neti vakinal niki upadiyana. Nidiyam jivanma midila. When you get rid of all the upadis without any balance, then you yourself are the self-luminous self. ஆதியாம் அப்பரமான்மாக்களின் ஐக்கியமாம் வாக்கியங்கள் செப்புவதோர்ந்து தெளி. You abide as the truth of the Mahavakyas. What you have to do? The simple act of de-identifying or freeing the consciousness of the upadis. Whenever the upadi thoughts come about the deha, indriya, prana, dhi, tamaha, oh, what a nice sleep I am having, how to improve the sleep? Let me have more hours of sleep, then I should be better rested. Not even that. For whom is this desire for better sleep? For me. Who am I? That tamaha also has to be inquired out. That is not an upadhi to be desired, though we all feel we have been really happy in deep sleep. And the physicians also say that your body, whatever that may be, it recovers a lot in deep sleep. But then that is also not to be sought in Atma Vichara. In Atma Vichara, for whom is this desire for better sleep? Then and there, jivastu daivika. If you hold the jiva still, moving is jiva, still is parama. Of course, bhava bhala. You are holding it with bhava bala, and with that bhava bala, if you hold, the vasanas are all burned. And when the vasanas are all burned, the bhava bala is no more required. The who am I, that stick also is thrown into the funeral pyre and it gets burned, and the bhava bala is no more required. Effortlessly, one is the self. So that is the import of this whole theme. This whole theme of 4 verses is 27 tells us that identifying as the jiva trapped inside the body and acting accordingly is the root of all fears. Identifying with the Paramatma is the freedom from all that. 28 says the Paramatma shines of his own or its own. It lights the upadis. The upadis can never reveal. So don't have the upadis as capable of, can you see the Paramatma with the eye? Can you see the Paramatma with increasing your pranayama? Can you see the Paramatma with your mind? Can you see the Paramatma with intellect? Can you see Paramatma by having deeper sleep? No. So get rid of all the instruments that is going to come in 30th. Before that, one clarification, that to see the Paramatma, you don't need a light apart. And you can't be a light apart, says Upadesha Saram. That you have to be one with the Paramatma. And the invocation to self-enquiry says, there is no better way to worship the Paramatma. If you say, as Bhagavan says, that story of taking a small bit of jaggery from the jaggery ball, which is now worshipped as Ganesha, you take a bit of jaggery from that jaggery ball itself and then re-offer it to Ganesha. That is how it is to say that I am adoring this great being. Whereas you are also that jaggery. And that is what is made clear in the 30th verse. How to abide as the self. Get rid of the non-self. Get rid of the upadis. What is the sadhana? Neti neti. Whatever is seen cannot be the self-luminous one. As Parvati Amma showed, that even if an effulgence is seen, that cannot be the self-luminous self. Get rid of that. And one abides as the aham, 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 atmarupena bhati. And that is Isha Darshanam Swatmarupataha. You are having darshana of Ishvara. You set out to have darshana of God to resolve your problem. Now, you are having direct darshana of Ishvara by going to his reality. How Ishvara rid of Maya Upadhi will be, that is where you are going by getting rid of your Upadhis. Therefore, to abide as that, the Isha Darshanam Swatmarupataha, Atma samstitihi swatma darshanam is how that story in Upadesha Saram ends. So these two stories, these two themes you can have in parallel. Vigrahendriya pranaditama nahameka sat tajjadam yasat satvabhasika chitko vetara sataya hichit chittaya hyam isha jivayor veshadibida satsvabhavato vastu kevalam veshahanatah swatma darshanam isha darshanam swatma rupata. Come back to Atma bodham 27, 28, 29, 30. The same brings us to neti neti. What is the sadhana to be done? Anything seen cannot be the self-luminous self. So ask for whom is this seen. That's why Bhagavan, when he sees Arunachala, he does not get carried away. He asks, who is the seer? Kandavan evanena karuthinul nada. Kandavan indrida nindrathu kande. The individual vanishes, the jiva vanishes, and the vastu daivika shines of its own. Kandaman endrida karuthedaville. For that self-luminous self, there is no other to reveal itself to. So there is no need to shine. So who is this Purana experience? Who is experiencing Purana? If you ask, this Purana also quietens down. Kandanan endrida karuthedaville. Kandilan endrida karuthedama. There is nobody else apart from the self for me to reveal. Is there anybody else for me to tell? No, I have not seen the self. So no, the finality is to abide as the self-luminous self and to inquire who is feeling this Purana, who is feeling the I. Then this Purana also quietens down. And the self alone is, till that self-enquiry is not going to leave us. Those ones picked up by grace who have been blessed with the sadhana of self-enquiry. Self-enquiry will not leave. Who am I will not leave till this final light, which doesn't even need the upadhi of shining, till that is realized to be our real nature. The who am I will be with us and it will merge into that self without two. Advitiya vastu is our real nature. Therefore, the who am I is also not required there. However, for the next 6 minutes or so till 8 o'clock, let's practice Atma Ucharam. Then we can listen to Akka. Ujulji, you can set the time for us. Namo Ramana.
Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Patience, Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana. We in this satsang are meditating on the verses of Anma bodham. And we are on the verses which are saying that there is no such thing as manifestation. I say at the beginning of my prayer, by the Supreme Self manifest as Ramana. But as Nandakumar ji said, remembering the verse from Ulladanarpadu, how can I say that there is Ramana who is manifest, the self is manifest as Ramana, or the self that is manifest as Ramana, unless I believe that I am manifest as Sharada. So, that was the previous verse which said that all that is mithya. It is like taking a rope to be a snake and getting worried by the manifestation, getting caught in the repercussions of taking something which is jada to be alive, thinking that it's creating so many difficulties, becoming anxious about it. So now what are we told? We are told that in this verse we are told there is nothing apart from the self. It does not need another light. So it is not as if my existence is dependent on the world. It does not, my existence does not need the world to light it. It does not need the world. It does not need anything which the senses are perceiving. If my existence was dependent on sensory experience, those of us who are devoid of certain sense abilities, like if one is visually challenged or auditory challenged, then one could not experience oneself. But the self is independent of the world. It is lighting itself. It is not lit by sense experience. So that is what the next verse is telling us. We can do neti. We can easily see that for my existence, I do not need any of the sense experiences. They do not validate my existence. It is lighting itself. I don't need to be eating something or seeing something or listening to something or smelling something or touching something in order to know that I am. We all say that in deep sleep we are easily aware that we exist. Bhagavan says in another verse in Ulladinarpadu that nobody says he or she is non-existent in sleep. So that we are existing even when the world does not exist clearly makes us understand. If we see these two verses together, the verse of the neti and the verse which says the self lights itself, so we can see that my existence is not lighted by the sense experiences. Therefore, I am in no way dependent on these experiences. I can easily drop them. The neti saying, I am not dependent on any of these things. My existence is not dependent on that. And my existence is not dependent, we can see the same way, not dependent on the prana, not dependent on the thought, because we exist minus all this, minus prana also in a short spell. See, if my existence was dependent on something, I should not be able to exist even for a short span of time without that. But the fact remains that one can hold one's breath. The fact remains that there are people, experts, who can hold their breath for a long time, long period of time. And we hear of some yogis who even agree to be buried under the earth, and they will be alive over there. And they can come out after some time and reveal themselves. So there is no dependence on the breath, and there is no dependence on thought, because we are free of thoughts in our deep sleep. Or even if we make an effort to drop thoughts also, sometimes we can experience for a short span, maybe for a few seconds, few minutes, or depending on the strength of the practice, maybe for a few hours, we are able to touch the thought free state. So, I am not dependent on my thoughts. It is not lighted by the thought. My existence is not lighted by thought. There is the famous Western philosopher Descartes who said, I think, therefore I am. And that is to say, if I think, I can make out that I am. Perhaps I do not know much about that philosophy except that I have heard this statement, and I think, therefore I am. But I am, therefore I may think or I may not think. I have the freedom to think or not to think, is what Bhagavan says. Thinking is not your nature, he says. So, in all those, Vigraha, Indriya, Prana, Dhi, Tamaha, Nandakumar ji brought it before us. He reminded us that all this is not not I, the neti. So, we don't require any of these to tell us I exist. Usually the example is given in a dark room. If somebody comes in suddenly and says, are you there? We will say, yes, I am there. So we do not need an external light to know the light of the self. That's the example which is usually given. So how do we apply when we go back? We can see that we are not dependent on any of these things for our existence and for our joy also, for our bliss also, because the self itself is of the nature of Satchit Ananda. The Ananda is implied in existence itself, just as consciousness is implied in existence. The Ananda is also implied in existence. It is absolute absence of fear, absolute absence of anxiety, says Bhagavan, because there is no other, there is no second to fear. There is no goal about which we have to be anxious. There is nothing to lose. This is already given. So there is nothing to seek. There is no dependence on the other. When we are told that it lights itself, that means it is complete in itself. It does not require anything apart from it to complete it, to make it full. It is full in itself. That is the example given is light lights itself. But it really means that it is complete. It is absolutely complete. It is Purnam. Therefore, does not require anything outside of it to make us conscious of it, to make us aware of it, or to give us any joy whatsoever. So, in our sadhana, whenever any other experience arises, we can negate it by saying, this is not I, and I don't need it also. I don't need it in any way to be aware, to be self-aware, and to be abiding in the source. I don't need any of these experiences. When I don't need them, why should I pursue them? One of the devotees of Bhagavan, Swami Tyageshananda, he gave a beautiful instance once. He said, supposing you are sitting and watching the road, or you're standing by the road, you're maybe waiting for someone to come, or it's just like that, you're just watching the road and you're watching the cars go by. So any car which comes by, you do not hop into that car. Every vehicle which comes, if you hop into that, any and every vehicle which comes, where will you end up? You are just watching the vehicles go by. Allow them to go. If you are interested in some vehicle, If you see your friend, perhaps you will get into his car and go with him. That too, if you are interested in going with that friend. Otherwise, you'll say, oh, hello, and you'll say bye again. Right? Similarly, there is no need to hop into every experience which you get. The moment your eyes see something, you don't need to hop into that experience and think, oh, I'm seeing this and what all goes with the process of seeing. Any sense experience happens, there is no need to follow that. That's what Nandakumar ji also said. Let us not follow it. Very often he tells us, let us not give way to the temptation which thought offers to us. Instead, let us recognize that this is complete in itself, doesn't need anything else. See, normally when we say, when we exist as a name and form, then what happens? Then existence and consciousness get separated actually, because I think I am. I have to assert that I am so and so. So this existence, the body by itself cannot say Jada Udal Nan Ennadu. It cannot say I exist. It cannot say. So consciousness and existence get separated, and there is a consciousness which is saying this body is I. Whereas when we get back to the self, that dichotomy will disappear. That disappears. Because there is no such dichotomy. Until we feel a dichotomy, until we feel something to be I, whether it is a body, whether it is a thought, whether it is an emotion. If I say this is I, there is the presence of the duality or the dichotomy. We can immediately become aware that the dichotomy is there. Therefore, this is not the Atmanubhava. When the dichotomy is there, this is not Atmanubhava, because the self lights itself. Whenever there is any element of duality, whenever there is any experience of duality in any form, this verse reveals to us that that is not the truth. It must be removed with the neti. This experience is not I, because it is having duality. Whereas in the self, there is no duality. The light is lighting itself. The self is lighting itself. There is no duality in it. So any experience which is in the realm of duality must be negated. And once it is negated, Bhagavan tells us, once you know this is not I, find out, ask yourself, who am I? Thought is not I, then who am I? Body is not I, then who am I? Sensations are not I, then who am I? So every time something is negated, the neti is negated, automatically the question will come within us. See, if I assume I am a body, then at a point when I negate that I am the body, what happens? I have to the question, who am I then? If I am not the body which I have taken myself to be, who then am I? If I am not the senses I have taken myself to be, who then am I? If I am not the prana, if I am not the thoughts, who am I? So our mind automatically gets to who am I. Actually, neti is assumed in who am I. Neti is already taken to be done. And when neti is over, then who am I starts. Then the inquiry starts. Already negation is over. So we do not negate, but it is implied. It is already included or implied in who am I. Therefore, Bhagavan does not necessarily give it as a step each and every time, although it is there in the booklet, who am I? The question, who am I, itself implies that everything else has been negated. Only then the question, who am I, can rise in us. And the question, who am I, is the best form of neti also, because it cuts away the possibility of association with any other thought. That is Bhagavan's grace. The question which he has given us is that capsule form and a very atomic form and a very powerful form of the neti, vichara, which is the traditional vichara. So who am I is that itself in its most powerful way, and that's Bhagwan's grace, which he is reminding us of this and telling us we are not dependent on anything whatsoever. That is, the self is absolutely free and complete. That is the assurance which is giving us through these two verses. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana to all.